He's back. The Baltimore Ravens hire Anthony Weaver as their next defensive coordinator.
You are Locked On Ravens, your daily Baltimore Ravens podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
You are Locked On Ravens. Welcome in to the show. I'm your host, Kevin Oestreicher of Ravens Wire, here with you on the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day, and now the #1 sports podcast network. Appreciate everybody for being here on this interesting edition here. We got a live reaction edition of the show, and we're going to be talking everything Anthony Weaver. He is back as the Ravens defensive coordinator. So an awesome move for Baltimore, in my opinion. We'll dive into why I believe that. We'll talk about what Weaver brings to the table in Baltimore, him returning, a little bit of what he did in the past in Baltimore versus what he's probably going to do here in his new role as defensive coordinator. As we know, Jesse Minter is going to be calling the plays. We'll also dive a lot into what's next for Baltimore. I mean, look, their staff is pretty rounded out right now. So there's a lot to like about this hire, in my opinion. We're going to dive into all of it here on the show. Thanks to all the everydayers, the first-time listeners. If you're somewhere in the middle, thank you as well. We have 5 days a week plus more of daily Ravens coverage and content for you on Locked On Ravens. And want to tell everyone today's episode, since the reaction edition of Locked On Ravens is brought to you by Gametime. Down the Gametime app, create an account, and use code Locked On for $20 off your first purchase. I love this hire. And Jesse Minter, he's been cooking, man. I mean, I love this staff that he is putting together. Jesse Minter is your head coach. Declan Doyle is your offensive coordinator. Anthony Weaver is your defensive coordinator. That is about almost as perfect as a combination as you could have gotten. You know, I guess my perfect combination, maybe, just using different names just for the sake of doing it, maybe was a Minter, McDaniel, and I don't know. I like Jim Leonard a lot, so maybe Jim Leonard, maybe Jim Schwartz, but Weaver also was on that list. He's going to come back to Baltimore as a defensive coordinator. Obviously, he's been in Baltimore as a player and as a coach. So he was with Baltimore he's familiar with the organization, right? He's someone that was with Baltimore from 2002 to 2005, and also was in Baltimore as an assistant from 2022 to 2023. He's someone that the players really resonated with, and actually just pulling up the stats because he was the defensive line coach in Baltimore. So I'm going to quickly pull up what his defensive lines did in terms of the sack department, just really quick. So 2022 for the Ravens, and again, there's a lot more that goes into, a defensive line than sacks, but I just want to use sacks for the example. Justin Houston had 9.5 sacks. That's a throwback. But Nnamdi Madubuike had 5.5, Calais Campbell 5.5, and then Jason Pierre-Paul. So, these are the types of guys that he was working with. Nnamdi still was scratching the surface of who he could be. Calais was still playing at a really high level at this point, but clearly was not, 27-year-old Calais. And then 2023, that was that historic defensive unit where Nnamdi had 13 sacks that year. That was Nnamdi's career year with Anthony Weaver at the helm. Jadeveon Clowney came in and he had 9.5 sacks. Van Noy had 9.5 sacks, or 9 sacks, excuse me. And again, I'm sure that Weaver, even though he wasn't like the outside linebackers guy, he was working with like the entire line, in my opinion. So he had a hand in the success of that unit. So this is a good hire to me. Now, again, there were questions for me about whether, because I kind of almost wrote off Anthony Weaver as an option because I just figured he'd want to call plays somewhere. But as those options have been dwindling across the league, Leonard goes to Buffalo and Raheem Morris went out to San Francisco. Patrick Graham's in Pittsburgh now. I'm not even sure, probably outside of that Raiders job, if there's a job that you can call defensive plays. I guess Arizona is one as well. But again, this is where it comes into like stable organization, and Weaver can be an overseer of the defense. That's probably going to be his role. And it's really cool to see all these guys come back to Baltimore, have connections to Baltimore. And again, it's something, and I never bashed John Harbaugh for doing it, but it's cool to kind of have that where I liked the hire when Harbaugh made it, and I liked the hire when Minter made it. Like, it's cool to have that. And actually pulling up Miami stats real quick as a defense, because looking at how aggressive they were, because Weaver, again, called the plays for them. Weaver, in my opinion, he got a bad rep in 2025. Now, the defense wasn't good in 2025 for the Dolphins, but we have to remember It was a really bad year for them. They were able to rattle off some wins towards the end of the season, which was good, and everybody played better there, which was great. But, in terms of the stats department, it doesn't look good in 2025. 25th in passing and 28th in rushing defense. They were the 24th scoring defense in the league, 22nd in yards, but they were essentially like not competing, right? They traded away Jalen Phillips. The roster wasn't as good as it needed to be. So that wasn't great. And in terms of conversions, they were kind of middling there, 17th and third down, 23rd in red zone. But the year before, this is where I'm going to give Anthony Weaver his flowers, because this was the year, and again, they went 8-9, so it wasn't like they were doing anything super crazy. But the Dolphins, they were the 7th best pass defense, giving up just 5.9 yards per attempt. They were the 12th best rushing defense at 4.4 yards per attempt. They were a top 10 scoring defense. They were 4th in total yards allowed, and they were awesome across the board in conversions. They were 6th in third down defense, 4th in red zone defense, and even if you want to go 4th down defense, they were 6th and 4th down defense as well. And that year, that was his first year. Zach Sealer had 10 sacks. Chop Robinson in his rookie year had 6 sacks and finished 5th in the defensive rookie of the year voting. Calais Campbell again. So maybe Calais will just come back here to Baltimore for one last ride. Hopefully, I would love that. I don't know if Calais plans on playing another year, but let's make that happen. I would love that. So I love it. I love this a lot. And let's actually look real quick at the aggressiveness, because I feel like that'll give us a better picture. And again, Minter's going to be calling the plays, and that more so is like the main thing to look at. But in terms of blitz percentage, if we find Miami and Weaver were very aggressive last season, 28.2% blitz percentage. That is what, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8th in the league, 28.2 in terms of blitz percentage. Now, hurry percentage is at 8.6, so that number dropped. Knockdowns are pretty far down. Pressure percentage is kind of in the middle. So despite being aggressive, they didn't necessarily convert that a ton into pressures. But again, this 2025 year for Miami, and I said that all along, even when we were going over initial DC candidates and even head coaching candidates when we were talking about Weaver, right? This is the cool thing about it, where we know that the Ravens, and I'm not sure if this was the case for the defensive coordinator position, but we had heard the reports from Peter Schrager and others that the Ravens were interviewing guys for both head coach and the offensive coordinator role. But this is what those head coaching interviews are for, of like just getting to know somebody. And the Ravens obviously know Weaver from his time in Baltimore, but like just, getting a vision of what they could look like in a specific role. But then either they are interviewing for another role within that, or you just put it in the back of your mind that, hey, he might not be the right guy for what we're doing at the head coach spot, but as a DC under Jesse Minter or whoever it was, if they knew it was Minter or not when they interviewed Weaver, I don't know. But they probably had in the back of the mind, man, this would be an awesome get as a defensive coordinator. And so being able to oversee things, being a connector with the players. And again, that's something I'll pull up Jesse Minter's quote that he said about what he was looking for in those coordinator spots. And he was not lying when he said he was hoping that those coordinator spots would be filled pretty quickly, and he was hoping he would have some news for everybody. I mean, he hired Declan Doyle the next day and didn't waste any time with Anthony Weaver here on Monday. So just a reminder of what Weaver said about the coordinator spots. I thought it was a really interesting quote. He ended up saying, quote, well, I'm trying to find the actual thing on the coordinator jobs. But again, DaCosta ended up saying that he was going to be the guy, the players are going to be involved in that a little bit more. So I'm curious to see maybe if Kyle Hamilton or Nnamdi Madubuike had a role in this. Maybe that was what Nnamdi's tweet was about. Maybe it was about Anthony Weaver, because we don't know whether he's going to be calling or if he's going to be playing or not. Hopefully he is, but he had that tweet. Maybe he was just pumped about Weaver and he knew that when he was tweeting. So there's so many different options that I think Weaver brings to the table. But first of all, he's just been around the game, right? Not only the organization, but just like he's been around the game in general, which I think is really, really cool, because, it doesn't mean you have to play in the NFL in order to be a successful. No, of course not. But that experience definitely helps. And we saw him as a connector with the players. And here's the quote. He said, quote, "I'm looking for leaders and connectors and relationship builders and schematic expertise, but most importantly, guys that players believe in." So when you look at what he's going to call and bring to the table, there's a lot of the aggressiveness with the blitzing, right? It's a bit of the defensive stuff with him, but I'm curious to see, all of the, how do I say it? All of the responsibilities that he's going to have is the defensive coordinator. And he could see this potential because, again, we talk about this a lot as like good organizations with a lesser role versus bad organizations with a bigger role. I think this can help him potentially get a head coaching opportunity maybe next year, maybe the year after, depending on how things go with this defense. Because, again, if people want to hire him, what's a great option to have and a thing to put on your resume if you're going to have the opportunity to become a head coach? It's, hey, I was a part of a great defensive unit with the Ravens in 2023, the head coaching experience in Houston, which obviously didn't go well, but he has that. And then in Miami, he had that year in 2024. Plus, now he was the overseer in 2 successful stints with the Ravens. I think it's good for everybody. The Ravens get a veteran coach in there who has playing experience and is connected with these players before. You get a guy who I think brings a lot to the table in terms of that connector ability and the ability to scheme up certain things. And again, it's almost like with Declan Doyle in Chicago, right? Where Weaver's not going to directly call the plays, but he's going to have a hand in everything. And I think that's what excites me the most is, it's not just going to be the D lineman that Weaver's working with here. It's going to be a little bit of everything for this Ravens team, which I'm really, really excited about. Really excited for the defense in general because they're getting a guy that wants to lead them. He's going to bring fire and energy and passion. He is that fire me up type of guy. And man, I just think that Jesse Minter hit this one out of the park. But coming up in the second part of the show, we'll dive more into what Weaver brings to the table in Baltimore, talk about Jesse Minter's staff a little bit, and a lot more. Stay tuned. Plenty coming your way on this instant reaction edition of Locked On Ravens. First, the show is brought to you by PrizePicks. The big game is almost here, and there's no better way to cash in during America's biggest sporting event than PrizePicks, where it always feels good to be right. And this week, PrizePicks has a special max discount for the big game live in the app right now. Drake May just needs 1 passing yard for the max discount to win. Add another player to your lineup, and if your picks hit, you can cash in. PrizePicks is super simple to use. It takes no time to get started. The whole format is clean. Pick more or less on 2 to 6 player projections. It makes watching games even more fun because every drive and every stat matters. The social feeds feature is awesome too because you can share lineups and even copy lineups from winners with 1 click. Download the PrizePicks app today. Use code LOCKEDONNFL to get $50 in lineups after you play your first $5 lineup. That's code LOCKEDONNFL to get $50 in lineups after you play your first $5 lineup. PrizePicks, it's good to be right. And the show is brought to you by DripDrop. Kicking off the year feeling good is the goal, right? And honestly, hydration is the easiest win. When I stay on top of it, my energy, focus, and mood all level up. But let's be real. Plain water doesn't always cut it, especially when you're grinding through long days, hitting the gym, or just trying to stay consistent with your health goals. That's where DripDrop comes in. Doctor-developed, proven fast hydration that helps your body and mind work better. Think clear, focus, better energy, elevated mood, even that fresh skin glow. Now, I've been using DripDrop as part of my daily routine, and it's honestly a game changer, not just for workouts, but every single day. I love that it uses a precise ratio of electrolytes and glucose for rapid absorption, delivering 3 times the electrolytes and half the sugar of leading sports drinks, and it tastes amazing. By the way, I'm obsessed with the lemon flavor. There are 16 original flavors and 8 zero sugar options to choose from. Right now, DripDrop is offering podcast listeners 20% off your first order. Go to DripDrop.com and use promo code LOCKEDONNFL. That's DripDrop.com, promo code LOCKEDONNFL for 20% off. Stock up now at DripDrop.com and use promo code LOCKEDONNFL. Moving along on Locked On Ravens, Kevin Oestreicher still here with you with an instant reaction edition of the show. The Ravens, they round out their big staff, their big names on the staff, their big positions of the staff by hiring Anthony Weaver as their defensive coordinator. So your head coach is Jesse Minter, offensive coordinator Declan Doyle, not offensive coordinator Anthony Weaver. Thanks so much for being here. We have 5 days a week plus more of daily Ravens coverage and content here on the show. So hit the like and subscribe button in video form and follow along and subscribe in audio form for that 5 days a week of Ravens content and coverage plus more. We have bonus episodes on the weekend when there are headlines. We got instant reactions after every single piece of big news and during the season, during games. So we're doing an instant reaction here now. We got watch alongs during the games, during the season. We got a lot of in terms of the Locked On Ravens squad show as well with myself, Sam Njoku, former Ravens receiver Kadri Ismail. We'll be live later tonight at 7:30 p.m. Eastern time, breaking this down even further on Locked On Ravens squad show. That's Mondays and Wednesdays, 7:30 Eastern. And then the Everydayer Club, where you can get some weekly Q&As with me, access to a Discord server, ad-free episodes, etc. Link for that in the description below, as well as on the Locked On website on the Locked On Ravens page. You can find out more there. All right. If you're with us in the chat live, or maybe you're in the comments after the fact, or even if you're in audio form, you want to comment there, send me a message on social media. What is your grade for the Ravens hiring Anthony Weaver? How are you feeling about the Ravens? Let's do scale of 1 to 10. Scale of 1 to 10, or you can put a letter grade if you want to. 1 being you're not, happy about it. 10 being you're ecstatic about it. Where are you with this hire? I'm putting it, look, I think this is like a 9.5 to 10 to me. Like, this is a great hire. There's no reason not to like it, in my opinion, because we know, look, if you had a problem with, how the Dolphins defense looked or what they're doing, Weaver's not calling the plays. So to me, I think that, okay, like if that aspect was there for you, I get it, but he's not going to be calling the plays. He'll have a hand in certain things, but I really, really, really like this because, again, there's not necessarily a risk factor here for me. He's someone that's well-liked. He's someone that brings that aggressive energy style, which I think that they need on that defense. And again, honestly, like this, and I've said this before, right? This role would have been perfect for Zach Orr had he gotten it 2 years later, right? If he had a couple more years of experience, not as the Ravens DC, and then I think maybe with the role of him not calling plays, but being able to have his hand in everything, I think that would have benefited Zach Orr. I just think that he wasn't ready to call plays. And I think that I've seen that a couple of times in the chat, despite that. So, I mean, I really like this. So it was something, and I see Tony putting it in. I didn't think we would get him due to not calling plays. I was in the same boat there. I was like, I didn't think Weaver was going to take an opportunity where he wasn't calling plays. But again, I think what happened was probably a combination of a lot of the spots where he could call plays, it was all drying up for him. He didn't really have a spot to go. And, he maybe didn't want to go to a team like Vegas or Arizona where, maybe that's going to be a disaster. I don't know. Like, I like Kubiak a lot in Vegas. That's the report of what it's going to be. Arizona, that's just a weird situation right now. But Baltimore gives you that stability of what it can be. So, again, I wouldn't be saying this if I didn't like that. Like, again, for Doyle, I was like, this is a, like, B hire for me because I really like it, but there is risk involved in terms of the no play calling experience and et cetera. But I see the vision, I see the potential, and I like them taking the risk. With Weaver, I think this is a very safe hire with a very, very high floor for a defense that, look, we're trying in Baltimore. This team is trying to return their defense to the excellence and the standard. And again, I do want to remind people, because it's not just about the sacks that happened in 2023. That 2023 Ravens defense was one of the best ever. A ton of incredible stats that year. Now, they weren't a great rushing defense, but they were the number 1 scoring defense. They were 6th in yards allowed. They were the best pass defense in the NFL. Look at conversion rates. They were the 2nd best red zone defense, 2nd best 4th down defense, 7th best 3rd down defense. Guys were flying around that football field, playing with intensity. And again, like, you can look back to that season with guys, again, it's only been it will be 3 years, which is crazy to think about. Time is flying a little too quickly here. We got to slow it down a little bit. But on that defense, again, Roquan Smith balled out that season. That was really the last time I feel like, we saw like the big Roquan. They had 158 tackles. Patrick Queen, who, again, I'm going to say this now, and this might be a hot take, but, we throw out some hot takes sometimes, but I believe it. I think that there is a possibility, and I don't know if it's official yet, but it probably will be. The Steelers will probably cut Patrick Queen. And maybe he comes back to Baltimore, because the Ravens, again, we know how PQ and Roquan played together in that Mike McDonald defense next to each other. And, things will probably be a little different under Jesse Minter. We'll see. But maybe he comes back to Baltimore and does the Pittsburgh-Baltimore thing. He had 133 tackles in 2023. Kyle Hamilton, obviously, that was his 2nd season in the league. And, he was doing his thing with 81 tackles. Brandon Stevens had an incredible year in that Baltimore Ravens defense in 2023 before obviously not in 2024. Geno Stone got a huge contract based off of his play, filling in for Marcus Williams. Like, again, like Michael Pierce was great. Arthur Millette was awesome. Ronald Darby had an incredible. So again, like, that defense got the most out of their guys, right? And so if I'm the Ravens, I'm trying to replicate that as much as possible, and obviously Zach Orr wasn't an option there. And Denard Wilson ends up going to New York to call plays. Mike McDonald, obviously, that's not an option either. He's in the Super Bowl right now. But I think that the fact that, and I see Tim talking about it, Weaver accepted a reduced role. I have faith that he's going to be loyal to Minter's vision. Yeah, I think those guys are probably really aligned on what they want to do here. And they both have that calling of like being able to connect with their players. And I'm not saying Doyle doesn't. Like, that's part of the thing that Weaver brings to the table and that Minter actively said that he was looking for. So I'm really excited with the possibility of Weaver, because there are guys that, you look at this roster right now, guys like a TJ Tampa, these are all guys we talked about, Mike Green, Malachi Starks, these younger players, ascending Travis Jones to the next level. Jones was a rookie when Weaver was there in 2023 as the DC. So, you have so many other options, or maybe he was in his second year. I can't remember. I think Jones, what was he, 2022 draft? Let's look at Travis Jones draft. He was, he was 2022. So he was in his second year. So he was a rookie when Weaver was in his first season with the Ravens. But regardless, those are all young players that Weaver and Minter can connect with and get the most out of using teaching, using different formations and formulas. And on the football field, I think they have a huge probability of getting the best out of those guys. Because look, if you see what Jesse Minter's defense was, the Chargers were very low in defensive spending, but we saw how good those defensive units were and how key that they were. I mean, again, just 2025, just to remind people, while they weren't like the best rushing defense ever, they were 18th in rush defense, 9th in pass defense. They were the 9th best scoring defense. And in conversions, they were 4th in red zone defense, 5th in third down defense. I mean, I'm expecting at this point with these numbers, Baltimore to be a really good conversion defense, which if you watch me and listen to me on this show, I am very big on the whole conversion thing with this Ravens defense. And even when I talk about the offense, like I was in shambles when this red zone offense was awful this season. But again, there were not as many resources in that Chargers defense as I think there are going to be in this Ravens defense this season, with obviously Hamilton and all those guys on big contracts. And we'll see how it works, but maybe getting in a big pass rusher in the building. So we're going to see. And again, if we remember correctly, the Ravens did choose Zach Orr over Anthony Weaver. They had an opportunity to hire Weaver because we know those assistants for the Ravens were flying off the board, going to other places after that 2023 season, and rightfully so. But look, they had the option to hire Weaver as their guy. That they went with Zach Orr. Clearly, that was a mistake, and there was a huge risk involved in that. I don't think there was as much of a risk in Weaver becoming their guy. I'm sure they felt like Weaver, or I guess Orr, could have been this, he's a young up-and-coming guy, and he can do a lot of these different things that Mike McDonald did. Didn't work. But they're wrong here, a couple years late, but they do it, and it's going to be a different role than he would have had in Baltimore under John Harbaugh as a defensive coordinator. But yeah, Charles saying Harbaugh's the one that let Weaver leave. So they do right that wrong. And again, I'm super pumped for him to come in the building and make sure that these guys are on their P's and Q's. Because again, I think that what Minter said, like, he is setting standards. I think that Weaver will help hold these guys to that standard, get the best out of them, fire them up, and show and have a hand in everything. That's the thing with the kind of overseer role on the defensive side of the ball with the defensive coordinator. It would have been the same conversation that we would have had if it was if it was Kubiak as the head coach, right? And we were all of a sudden talking about, okay, well, who's this offensive overseer type guy going to be? Defensively, it's going to be Weaver. I was curious about, for example, like a guy like Jim Leonard, who I would have loved in Baltimore. I said, all right, like I would love this, but does he want to be an overseer and not call plays? Clearly, the answer was no. He went to Buffalo. There were probably other coaches that the Ravens were interested in that said, yeah, no, I want to call plays somewhere, and went to call plays. But with Weaver, I think he's in a unique spot right now where I think even if he has a good year, teams will still want to hire him as a head coach instead of being, we need to see as a defensive play caller first. Because no, not only does he have defensive play calling experience, but he has head coaching experience. So I'm expecting a good year from Weaver, a great year from this defense with the Minter-Weaver combination. And I just think Jesse Minter is doing an amazing job with this staff. Coming up with the final part of the show, we'll dive more into what's next for Baltimore now that the big positions in their staff are all filled out now. So we'll talk about what's next and a lot more coming up on this Instant Reaction edition of Locked On Ravens. First, this show is brought to you by Quo. New year, new systems. This is the time when a lot of us look to the messier parts of how we run our businesses and think there has to be a better way. And there is. Streamlining your communications is one of the quickest upgrades you can make. That's why today's episode is brought to you by Quo, spelled Quo, the smarter way to run your business communications. Because when your team is reachable, organized, and communicating in one place, you're not just working cleaner, you're creating more opportunities to connect with customers. I love how simple Quo makes everything. Your whole team can call and text from one shared business number, so nothing gets missed. Everyone sees the full conversation thread, which makes replies faster and more personal. It works right from your phone or computer, and you can even keep your existing number. It's no surprise Quo is the number one rated business phone system on G2, trusted by more than 90,000 businesses, from solo operators to growing teams. Make this the year where no opportunity and no customer slips away. Try Quo for free, plus get 20% off your first 6 months when you go to quo.com/lockedonnfl. That's quo.com/lockedonnfl. Quo, no missed calls, no missed customers. And the show is brought to you by Gametime. There's nothing like being in an NBA arena, the crowd, the energy, the moment. Getting tickets, though, that part hasn't always been so simple. That's why Gametime has become the go-to app for scoring tickets fast. Without the hassle, it puts the advantage back where it belongs, with the fans. Now, for me, I love seeing the all-in prices up front. There are no surprise fees at checkout. Plus, being able to see the view from the seat before buying made the decision super easy. And the zone deal stood out to me because you pick the section and Gametime picks the seats and you save. There are great last-minute options, too, with NBA tickets showing up at solid prices, and everything feels quick, intuitive, and stress-free from start to finish. Take the guesswork out of buying NBA tickets with Gametime. Download the Gametime app, create an account, and use code LOCKEDON for $20 off first purchase. That's code LOCKDON for $20 off. Download the Gametime app today, and remember, it's gametime.co, not .com. Continuing on, Locked On Ravens, Kevin Oestreicher still here with you on this Instant Reaction Monday edition. Starting off the week fast and furious is Jesse Minter with this hire of Anthony Weaver, which I'm super ecstatic about. So be sure to like and subscribe button in video form and follow along and subscribe in audio form for 5 days a week, plus more daily Ravens coverage. If you have a friend or a family member who's a Ravens fan and wants some daily Ravens coverage, be sure to send them over here our way on Locked On Ravens. Our audio and video communities are growing at such a rapid rate, and even on social media too. You can follow me on social media, Chaos34, Twitter, Instagram, the whole 9 yards. All right. I love this for the Ravens. I love this for Anthony Weaver. I love this for Jesse Minter. But now the question becomes, what comes next? And I see just here saying him and Minter together will put these guys in position to be the most successful. I agree. Like, again, having a guy who has the player experience, the coaching experience, and a guy like Minter who was a young, innovative defensive mind, I think this is awesome. And Pretty Sunshine saying, I'm so thrilled Weaver's coming home. Yeah, me too. I'm thrilled with it. And so what comes next for the Ravens? Again, we're going to see more hires on the staff come through, I'm sure, right? There are going to be more things that happen. But to me, all attention now, because the defensive coordinator position is all squared away, it all turns to Lamar Jackson, in my opinion, getting that extension done. And the Ravens just officially announced a couple of their coaching staff additions officially: Dwayne Ledford, Mike Mickens, Tyler Santucci, and Charlie Gelman. So those are the coaching staff additions on the assistant side. They also announced Declan Doyle as their offensive coordinator officially. So these things starting to roll in and becoming more real as things happen. Everything just, it feels right. It feels right to me. And these hires that Jesse Minter's making with Anthony Weaver, with Declan Doyle, I can see the vision. This is what I talked about this morning. If you were able to watch or listen to the show, this is what I talked about this morning, of like the confidence level for me in this Ravens team is so night and day compared to where it was a month ago. Like legitimately, after that Pittsburgh loss, I just really wasn't sure if they were going to fire. I had doubts if they were going to fire John Harbaugh. They were just going to stick to the status quo and be okay with this, but they weren't. And they have addressed this all, whether it be the Harbaugh firing, the Minter hiring, Minter filling out his staff. Like it all has just felt so right for me for this Ravens team. And I love that, because for the past handful of seasons, like, we know they're going to be a competitive team for the most part, and we know they have the talent, and like you have that floor and whatnot. But it didn't feel like they could have the potential to go to the Super Bowl. And we talked about that on the show a lot. But in the back of my mind, it was always, well, look at how these other seasons have gone. Like, we've seen this over and over again. So like, I'm hoping they'll win the Super Bowl. I'm feeling that they could. But there was always that thought process in the back of my mind. Now it's just fresh. It's new. And it's new in the way that, like, obviously you're bringing in new guys, but the familiarity of bringing in some guys that are connected to Jesse Minter, bringing back some coaches, those are the types of moves that it all is coming together from a bunch of different facets. And, I see Righteous saying EDC is fighting for his job right now. He knows he can't miss on anything when it comes to this team. Yeah, I've talked about that, and I agree. Where, the shield of John Harbaugh, it's gone from Eric DeCosta. He needs to be able to make these moves right. And if I'm Eric DeCosta, I'm calling up teams saying, "Hey, man, I need this right now. You need to trade me Max Crosby. Let's make a deal." And getting aggressive with those offers or whatever it may be, addressing the offensive line, addressing the defensive line. With Lamar Jackson, being aggressive and getting a deal done there, because we know that they can't operate to the way that they want to with a $75 million cap hit or 70 plus, whatever it is for Lamar Jackson. Getting Linderbaum re-signed, that'd be huge. Like, that's where the attention now turns for me, where, again, the rest of the staff being filled out is very important, and we'll continue to talk about that on the show. But as these staff hires continue to come in and more positions get filled, and they're filling up quickly because the Ravens are fighting all these other teams for these staff members, right? Like, there are a lot of teams that underwent full-scale staff changes, and coaches are switching teams like that. Like, they're going all over the place. So the Ravens, they have to be aggressive in that as well. But next order of business, 1,000% has to be Lamar Jackson. Absolutely. And Pony saying we need to target O and D line now through the draft and free agency. Yeah, that's the big thing. And again, Weaver with his defensive line experience, him being able to not only connect with the guys that were already on the roster when he was there in 2022 and 2023, but bringing in new guys. And, I'm super stoked for a guy like Aeneas Peebles, right? Peebles is someone that, if you listen to me all last year, I was all in. I was all in on Peebles during the draft process, all in on it. And I think that he was a guy that I wish we had seen more of over the course of the season. I thought he showed flashes of potential. But Weaver's a guy that I think can, again, with Minter and Weaver and their ability, like we talked about, to get the best out of their guys, I'm expecting, because, again, these guys already have high ceilings, especially these younger players. But the goal and the challenge with some younger players when you're on contending teams is sometimes there's not a lot of time for a runway. Where for Malachi, for example, he was making some pretty brutal mistakes early on. And again, you just kind of got to ride it out with him. And I'm glad that they did, because everybody's a rookie. Some rookies are able to just come in day one and just be, boom, I'm great. Other rookies need time to ascend to that level. And there's no right or wrong either way there. And so for Malachi, there was a balancing act of, okay, how much do you play him or anything, or with a lot of different rookies. I'm not just talking about Malachi in general. It was a slow year for a lot of the rookies at the start of the season, but we started to see those flashes. But now, with a full season under their belt, with a full off season under their belt, this to me, I think signals a lot of good things for these younger players, and a guy that the players can connect with and have full confidence in. And, not that they didn't like Zach Orr or anything. I'm not saying that. But again, I just feel like as the losing started and the defense was doing their bad thing, maybe the confidence level was like, man, like, what's going on here? So that to me is a really big aspect of this whole thing. And so those are the types of guys, like I mentioned earlier, TJ Tampa is another player, with Weaver not only overseeing the D-line, but overseeing the entire defense. He is super aggressive with everything. And I think, to me, with the Ravens and what they're doing here, they're bringing in, because actually this was something with John Harbaugh that I talked about a lot with the Harbaugh era and what John Harbaugh was doing. With Baltimore, it felt like there was always a decent combination of young coaches with veteran guys, but it always tended to lean one way or the other, right? It tended to lean, it was a much more veteran staff with some really impressive young coaches, or it was a younger staff with a lot of, a couple of vet coaches here or there. I think with this one, what I've always wanted to see is like pure balance. And while we got some level of that with John Harbaugh, I'm not saying it wasn't there with him. This is what we're seeing again here. It's the pure balance of having young coaches that can come in there and have extremely high ceilings with, some risk, but still some decent floors. And then you have vet coaches coming back in the building, former players with experience, et cetera, like a Weaver and Dwayne Ledford and some of those guys, et cetera. That to me is perfect. You essentially want that blend of guys on your staff, and with a younger head coach who is going to be able to kind of carve his own way and cement his own legacy, bringing in guys that he is connected with, he is familiar with, whether it's him working with them, or maybe, again, like I'm curious to see if Weaver brings in anybody from Miami. That'd be, again, Calais, come on back. Calais, come on back. I know he was in Arizona, but come on back to Baltimore. If Jalen Phillips, he's a free agent, maybe you make that connection early on. Or he was traded to Philly, but Jalen Phillips was in Miami with Anthony Weaver. He's a free agent. So maybe the Ravens make a move for him. I mean, we'll see what ends up happening. We also just got breaking news that Davis Webb is officially being promoted to offensive coordinator in Denver, so not a surprise to anybody, but we're far past the Davis Webb trade in Baltimore. Declan Doyle is the guy. So I'm super pumped for this. I'm really excited. I love what is happening in Baltimore right now. My confidence is through the roof with this team. Anthony Weaver, your newest defensive coordinator. Head coach Anthony Weaver, head coach Declan. Well, let's start it again. Head coach Jesse Minter. I'm going through all the names. I'm so pumped up. Head coach Jesse Minter, offensive coordinator Declan Doyle, defensive coordinator Anthony Weaver. There you go. Third try is a charm. So I have you here today, though, on Locked On Ravens. Thank you so much for tuning into the show. On the web, be sure to like and subscribe button in video form and follow along and subscribe in audio form for 5 days a week plus more of daily Ravens coverage coming up again. Got the Locked On Ravens squad show tonight at 7:30 p.m. Eastern time. Myself, Jismail, and Sam Njoku. Then, of course, we'll be back here tomorrow doing our regularly scheduled programming. So be sure to stay tuned, and I'll see you right back here soon on Locked On Ravens.